Welcome to episode, I almost said season 18, episode 18 of the Professional Evil Perspective. I'm Kevin Johnson.
And I'm Nathan Swady.
And we're probably never going to be better at this than we are right now.
Sometimes it's a matter of staying in front of the crash, right?
Yeah, I've always said that I have successfully fallen uphill. And
I can see that. It's like surfing, right? Surfing is just controlled falling. You just stay in front of the crash.
My problem with surfing is it's outside, and I don't do a lot of outside stuff. So
I've surfed twice, both times in Jacksonville. I really enjoyed it, but
you know what? I remember that. I forgot about you doing that. For the people who don't know, Nathan doesn't live in Jacksonville, but the main office of the company is, and so he was here visiting, working, whatever, and went surfing. Jacksonville is also not the best place in the world to surf. Like, don't think Jacksonville is going to win any awards for surfing tourneys.
It's better than Tulsa.
Okay, that is valid. I did just see something, and it was some clickbait headline, so I didn't click it. And it's a device that they will drop into a lake.
Okay.
And it will cause, like, it's a wave generator, like you see like on cruise ships or on like water parks, but it's designed specifically to, like, hey, I have a lake in Tulsa, I'd like to make wavy. And yeah, it was, I thought, man, I can't believe it's 2022 and this is the first time I've seen somebody doing something like this. But that's not what we're talking about today. What we're talking about today, and Nathan, when he does his magic of handing it to Kathy to edit, we'll get the link to the article. The Federal Trade Commission has, and as far as I know, it's official now, right? It's outside of the pre-release. They've released the judgment, their action against Drizly because of the breach that they had.
Drizly is like the Uber for alcohol, right?
I wouldn't call it Uber, though, because Drizly has the same name as all the Web 2.0 things, where they had to drop a vowel or a consonant or have, right? Like, was it Flickr was like one of the first ones where it was missing the E, and that was how you knew it was a Web 2.0 site, is that it wasn't spelled correctly.
See, I figured that was just their way of finding a domain name that wasn't used.
There is that. Okay, this domain name is available because we misspelled the word.
We could use Kerr ideas. Ideas. I guarantee that's not taken.
I guarantee. Well, now it is. And, I can't remember who did it. A friend of mine, a guy I in the security field. He was in a coffee shop, and there was a startup group, like these tech bros or whatever. Like, they were discussing and how difficult it was to find a domain name, and they finally came across one that was available, and they were like bragging loudly and disturbingly about it. And so he registered the domain name from the coffee shop that they had just spent 2 hours coming up with, right? Which I think is awful and hilarious. So they released it. Drizly had a breach. Like 2.3 million people's data was exposed. And I want to be very clear. Like, one of the things that I think is so important to remember is that it's not just they had a breach, but they had a breach after they had other breaches, they'd had other issues, they had been told repeatedly about problems, type of thing, right? Like, the Federal Trade Commission, whether you like them or hate them, they don't tend to go after companies who have had a single problem, right? Like,
yeah. So I don't know the history. All I know is what the FTC provided. Like, I didn't go through I didn't follow the whole court case and all that, or I guess it wasn't a court case, but I didn't follow the whole case. What they described is that some in 2018, some employee or whatever published their cloud credentials to GitHub, right? An API key, credentials, something, right? And that they were alerted. It was a breach. They discovered it. They fixed it, whatnot. Then they said 2 years later, hackers breached an employee account, got access to the corporate GitHub, and then from there got into a database and stole customers' information.
Yeah.
Here's my problem, or my concern. I guess let's call it a concern. Tell me a company in the world that has a breach, and will fix everything good enough perfectly so that another employee's legitimate credentials aren't compromised in 2 years' time.
Yep. And this is one of the things lots of people talk about, and I agree with you, right? Like it seems harsh to
Yeah.
say you had this problem, you fixed it. Here are the quotes and
How
whatever.
can you fix it?
No. That's what I
Fire
said.
your
The
users.
quotes and italics and everything else like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And then 2 years later, a completely different type of breach
Exactly.
happens. And then the FTC comes after you. And what I will say is, I don't know any specifics about this case
Yeah.
beyond what is public. I've not done any work on it or whatever. But here's what I know about the Federal Trade Commission. The Federal Trade Commission, as far as I've ever seen, and full disclosure, I have worked with the FTC as an expert witness in cases, right? So, full disclosure, I've worked with them. I have never seen them release all of the information about what they did,
Sure.
why they did it. And in every case that I've been involved in, there is way more than what is in the news. And part of the reason for that is, as part of the case, as part of the investigation, as part of that, they gain access, through court orders, through discovery, through whatever, to a lot of very sensitive information.
Right.
So in almost every case, they've already agreed to not release everything that they look at, right?
Yep.
And in my opinion, this case has every earmark of there's more going on here. And here's the main reason why. This is the first case I've seen, and every article I've read says the same thing. So it's not just Kevin doesn't know, right? This is the first case judgment where the judgment not only calls out the company, but also adds to the settlement a call out where the CEO personally, any future company the CEO works for at a certain level, there's right,
Yeah.
like he's also under the settlement, right? Like, so you hire this guy as your executive at another company, all of a sudden your company is under the same requirements as Drizly because you've hired this guy. That tells me there's more going on here than just,
So
hey, you didn't follow security right, you screwed up. Because you and I both know users are going to use her,
yeah.
and
So
we're all users, right?
I want to come back to the CEO thing because
Yeah.
I think that is probably the biggest part of the case. But so reading through the article and the decision and whatnot, they did call out some. They didn't give details, but they said basically Drizly didn't follow. It says they failed to implement basic security measures.
Yep.
They stored data in an unsecured platform. They neglected to monitor for security threats. So to your point, it does appear that they were just negligent, right? They didn't do the basic stuff. My concern about that is there have been a lot of bills, both at the federal level and at the state level, attempting to hold executives responsible.
Yes.
And my concern is that by not giving out enough details, that legislatures are going to follow the FTC example. And the danger of those bills is that if it's vague enough and it's not right, if it's not, here's what's considered significant enough and here's where, well, this is just normal.
Yep.
My concern is that we're going to get really bad laws based on this decision.
And I will tell you right now, bluntly, all those laws suck.
Yeah.
I've been a vocal opponent of legislation for the sake of legislation, right?
Yep.
Way too many legislators are like, we must do something, protect the children, and they pass a law and they're stupid. The Federal Trade Commission, and I'm biased, right? They have long had a history, and I like this, where they will say, we're not setting the standard you have to follow, the industry has, and you're not following the industry. And I'll give you a perfect example of that. In a case, one of the cases I worked, and I'm just going to leave it at that. One of the cases I worked, they leveraged the PCI standard and said, like it, dislike it, whatever.
Right.
But the defendant, for the lack of, I don't know what their official term is, I think it's defendant, actually said, hey, you're saying we didn't meet standards and you don't have any standards. And the FTC said, yeah, you're right. We don't set those standards. You do.
Yeah.
Your industry has this standard. This is the one you agreed to. This is blah, 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 blah. And so in my opinion, while I agree with the idea that if they don't reveal this information, uh, legislatures are going to legislate badly. My argument to that would be the benefit the FTC gives citizens, the benefit they give companies who are under investigation of agreeing to not release stuff that they get outweighs the danger of a legislature passing a law that's stupid because of it. And here's why I think it outweighs it. It's because the legislature is going to pass laws that are stupid anyways, right?
Yeah, well, man, I don't know. I mean, I see what you're saying. My concern with all cybersecurity legislation is there is so much nuance that's
oh, of
involved
course.
in understanding,
Yes.
and it's just right. It's easy to build regulations for things that are static, right? Like how strong beams have to be, and what an engineer has to do to verify that that beam is strong enough to hold up to an earthquake, right? Like that doesn't change. You don't have an intelligent adversary that's going to modify the attack based on, the controls that get put in place. Cybersecurity has that added level of nuance that it just concerns me. I guess I'll
Well,
just say that.
but I agree with the concern, and my concern is I'm going to put that concern greater. I don't think they should be legislating cybersecurity. Why? Because cyber theft is theft. We have laws against theft.
Yeah.
Cyber, right? Like those types of things, and I am the wrong person to discuss this because I believe that the 90-year-old white men that run our country, because that's right, like the majority of Congress is dead. They just don't know it yet. By the time we add their ages together, right?
I
They
think
just
I think that's unfair to 90-year-olds. So
that is
so
true.
far
That is true.
we have a hard case that 80-year-olds don't do a great job. I don't know that we can really say that about 90-year-olds.
That's a good point. That's a good point. I just love the fact that we have a quote unquote mandatory retirement age of 65, unless you're a congressperson. And so I like these people. I don't remember who the congressperson was, but he was proud of the fact that he didn't know how to use his own email, that his secretary, administrative assistant, whatever, would print out his emails, he would read them, handwrite responses, and the administrative assistant would email them as him. He was proud of this, yet he was putting forward cybersecurity legislation. Right.
So,
but let's go to the CEO.
yeah, let's get back to the CEO thing because that's really that's the unique part of this is as you mentioned earlier. I think his name is Reyes, is how you pronounce it.
I don't remember,
It's
and I
R-E-
should have looked.
I know I didn't look it up anyway. It's Rellas, which I'm gonna guess is Reyes. The order actually follows him, and basically they call him out specifically as being negligent.
Yep.
In addition to the company. So let's not talking about this case. What are your thoughts on that in general? I know you're not pro legislation in general, and we're pretty similar from a libertarian perspective, but
but not nut job libertarians, because there are lots of nut job libertarians, right?
And I'm okay with them having the freedom to be nut jobs.
Yes, absolutely.
So what do you think about the idea of holding executives personally liable for a company's negligence in cybersecurity?
So in my head, and I want to be very clear, like you said, ignoring this case because I don't know why he was held personally liable, right? Ignoring this case, I believe there are absolutely cases, or that's a bad word. There are scenarios where the CEO, the CIO, the CISO, whatever, should be held personally liable, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. And I'll go so far as to say that I don't think that's any different than any other case where like I was just reading this thing last night, and I'll acknowledge the fact that it was a Reddit thread about bad lawyer cases, so there's no actual vetting of whether this is true or not, but that somebody sued a company because it caused a problem, and they got an email from two executives that were discussing the fact that they were hiding data from the case, and that they knew they were bad, and they were just waiting for the defendant, the person who sued, not the defendant, the person who sued, to die because it was an older lady and they knew she was going to, she was sick or whatever. And they, in this email thread, supposedly these two executives discuss they should be held personally liable, right? Like, right?
Yeah, I
Like,
can't argue with that.
right.
Well,
And so now let's take it to the case of,
well, here's a
I'm
here's a
that,
little mellower example, a counter example that I think
yeah,
maybe is more controversial. So I've got a friend who was a CISO for a power company, um, implemented a lot of great controls. They really tightened things down. They were doing a great job, fixing things, making them more secure.
yeah,
Company got a new CIO, and the CIO basically said, "This is a waste of time. This is stupid. You're going way overboard. This is completely
yeah,
unnecessary." Uh, basically, long story short, the CISO left. A lot of the controls started getting rolled back. Blah blah blah. Now, from that perspective, if something were to happen, in my head, that CIO is personally
yes,
responsible for that.
yes.
Should
And
he
I'm not
be
saying the
liable?
company isn't also liable.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
They made the decision and all that, but in my head, regardless of liability, the CIO is responsible. He made the call
Yeah.
without anybody else's insight and to change.
And that's provable, right? Right.
I would
If
assume,
we,
yeah.
and the reason I said, well, yeah, I'm saying like, if it's provable, like, because I can say all the time, like when I was at Blue Cross of Florida, there were decisions made. I'm not talking security, I'm talking in general,
Mhm.
that I looked at as an IT person and went, man, that was stupid. Why would you do that? Right. But I couldn't prove, I didn't know whether the CIO actually made that decision. I just know it came from on high.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
But if you can prove, okay, here is and let's talk about the Uber breach, right? He was held liable for covering it up and lying. And we talked about this in a previous episode. I think it was us, another podcast maybe. But if you can look at something and say, yes, Nathan made this decision, Nathan had the authority to make the decision, and Nathan had the information to know that the decision was wrong. And I think that's the key one,
yeah.
right? Because we've got lots of executives, I, we have lots of executives that we talk to that it is obvious that they know their business, but they don't know the ramifications. They
Right,
don't
right, yeah,
really understand. So holding you've got a CEO that is an expert at plumbing because she's been a plumber for years and she started this business and she's the CEO and that's her expertise. And then we come in as a consultant and say, look, the security, whoa, bad. And she makes a decision or he makes a decision or whatever that isn't good. That's different than somebody who has the knowledge, the experience, the information, has accessible. And I say that from a perspective of, I'm not saying it's always different. I'm
yeah.
saying,
That's
right,
it.
if we say do this and then their staff says, no, those consultants are just trying to get more billable hours. We shouldn't do that. Right.
Yeah, that's if there's a reasonable, yeah. If it's
Right.
just well, we don't like what those consultants said, let's go
That,
find somebody else, right? Shopping
yeah.
for our own QSA kind of
Well, exactly. Like matter of fact, I personally think that the companies that shop for their own QSA, the staff that did that shopping for the QSA should absolutely be held liable
yeah,
for
yeah.
the crap, right? And because you and I have seen that way too many times
For
where,
for folks that don't understand that analogy, with PCI, the credit card compliance stuff, you have to have a qualified security assessor do an audit of your environment if you're above a certain size. And so those QSAs, you have to go through and
get a
just
raw
basically,
an assessment.
yeah, you have to do a report on compliance and validate everything. But there's a lot of stuff that's vague and not really clear. So a lot of companies will come through and say, "Hey, here's how we interpret this, so that our environment is compliant. We want to find a QSA that interprets it the same way,
Yeah.
so that we can not have to deal with these additional costs." And
We've seen companies where they'll get the report from the QSA. The QSA will say you fail, but obviously they say it more formally than that. They
yeah,
say it in PCI, and then the company will ignore that report and go pay another QSA, and they'll actually pay for multiple QSAs to come in until they get one that says, "Yep, That's good. You pass, right?
Right.
That's what shopping for a QSA is. Good,
Yeah.
good point. I knew what you meant, and that's bad.
So with this,
My answer to your original question is,
yep.
I absolutely believe there are cases where the person should be held liable for something. I can totally see the idea of a settlement following a person through their career. I am curious because I read this one, right? And okay, if you hire this dude and he has the level that requires them to have it, bluntly, the only real thing that you end up having to do is you have to implement a full information security program, right?
Yeah.
I think we're going to go back to the shopping for a QSA.
Yeah.
What constitutes a full?
How are you going to prove that? That's my concern a little bit. And
Yeah.
there's a little bit of me that's concerned about. Think about this guy's career, right? If he leaves Drizly, where's he going to go?
Well, that's what I was going to say.
Who's hiring?
Let's look at Secure Ideas. If this guy comes out for a job and Secure Ideas is looking for that position and we interview him, we would be hiring him knowing we're immediately under scrutiny by the FTC.
Exactly.
Like, done. Oh. They're watching you.
I mean, and so that makes me wonder, like, all right, if I'm going to take a CE, a C-level position, am I going to negotiate part of my contract to have some type of waiver, or I get a payout or insurance, or I don't know. It's interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah, I don't know how it works. I'm very, very curious about how that will work.
So here's my biggest, and I know we got to wrap it up here in just a second. My biggest concern about this whole thing, I'm trying to find the very end of the article, all the way down at the bottom of the description of this. Each violation of the order in the future of them not doing a good enough job may result in a civil penalty of $46,000.
No, that's not true.
All right, what did I miss?
$46,517.
$46,517. So
I always love numbers like that because that number is based on something, right? Like it's the percentage of the monthly sales or like something.
So my first thought was like, oh, that's for each record that's stolen. But that can't be true because they basically said this applies to any organization he works for that loses over 250,000 records. And at that'd be like $11 billion. I don't see the FTC putting out $11 billion fines.
No. And my understanding is that this civil penalty, I believe this civil penalty is similar across the board when they do these judgments.
Yeah.
Right?
So who cares? Does it even really matter if they get a $46,000 fine for not being better in the future?
I don't know. That's the same thing as, right? Yeah. You fine a billionaire $20 for speeding, and you fine the same fine against somebody who makes minimum wage.
Yeah,
right? You're not really punishing the person. That's why GDPR does its fine the way it does. It's an attempt to actually penalize the person, unlike this type where it's like, because I've been in the meetings with executives where they have said, okay, if we implement that control, it's $100,000 a year. If we don't implement the control and we get caught, it's $46,517. My math says you can get fined twice and still save money.
Yeah, exactly.
Over the yearly control.
Man, I don't know. We'll see. It'll be interesting to see where the legislators go with this.
Yeah.
It'll be good.
Awesome, man.
Cool. Talk to you later, Kevin.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.